Welcome back to She Shield. I'm your host, Sofia, and I'm going to start doing these intros that kind of explain and share who the guest speakers are, kind of what we talked about in the episode, because as you know, if you're a regular listener, we tend to jump around a little bit. And so I'm really glad you're here, first of all. Today, I'm talking with Tactical Belle. Belle is an incredible lady. I found her on Instagram. She's actually a faceless account. So if you go to our YouTube channel, where all of the long form video content for these episodes are, you'll see that her face is going to be blurred out. She likes to have a little bit of privacy in this world where privacy is very rare. So as you all can understand, that's kind of how we're handling that. We had the most incredible conversation about what preparedness really is. I first asked her to define preparedness, and then we go in to talk about the spectrum of preparedness, everything from things like a natural disaster to full civil unrest. And we talk about some really important topics in that realm, everything from how to stay in communication with your loved ones, all the way to how to prepare for water, both filtration and purification. So these conversations are some of my favorite. I've been a prepper for a long time. Of course, you know, she puts me to shame with how much she's done, but it just is a really good opportunity to kind of audit yourself as we speak, to think of ways that you can become better prepared. Before we hop in, guys, I want to tell you about the concealment community. It is my absolutely free, 100% free Facebook group called the concealment community. I started this because I wanted to become more accessible to people like you, the listener who takes time to listen to episodes like those given in She Shield. And I wanted to start hosting lives, and I didn't know where to do that, and do that for free and make it, as I said, accessible. I'm going to start rolling out one-on-one virtual classes. I'm going to start, sorry, cut that. Very soon, I'm going to have an online. As you all know, I'm a firearms instructor, so not only do I offer in-person classes, but very soon I will have my own concealed carry class in the Practical Shooting Training Library by Joey Sauerland on concealed carry. And then I'm also going to start offering one-on-one virtual training where we will set you up with your very own concealed carry setup that is best for you, as well as work on some firearms fundamentals using dry fire. Since we'll be across the screen, everything will be dry fire, but I'm going to start offering those soon. And the community is just a way to, in the meantime, connect with like-minded people and then hear about some of my updates when it comes to firearms instruction, if that's something you're interested in doing with me. All right, guys, thanks for sticking around this long to listen to that. If you haven't already, please rate the podcast. That is how we get seen and shared. In the meantime, let's hop into the episode. All right, guys. Well, I'm here today with Tactical Belle. I'm really excited for this episode in particular. The world is always taking a turn for the worse, it seems, especially nowadays. But we're here to talk about preparedness, and that's such, in my opinion, a subjective word. And I'm really excited to bring some definition to it today, talk about the spectrum of what is preparedness, and then jump into some real world applications. So Belle, thank you for being here today. I would love for you to introduce yourself to the listeners.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm super excited to be here. For anyone who hasn't seen my page before, it's called Tactical Belle. I do a lot of emergency preparedness. That's everything from land navigation to emergency communication. I do a lot of survival stuff that's just basic, like how to start a fire. So there's a wide array of things on there. And I'm excited to talk about it today because I think a lot of people have a picture of preparedness or like what a prepper is in their head, when really we should all be prepared at some level, and there's a wide variety out there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I was telling you before this episode, which I feel no shame about this, okay? Because as a kid, I was probably more prepared than the other kids. So we'll say that. But I was fascinated with the idea of the zombie apocalypse. Like, I was watching The Walking Dead with my mom. I know this sounds really cringy, guys, but stay tuned. Stay tuned. I was watching the zombie apocalypse movies with her, like everything from Resident Evil to... There's a movie called The Scout's Guide to the Zombie Apocalypse. It's hilarious. If you haven't seen it, it's so worth the watch. But with that said, I was like obsessed with this idea of being prepared and wanted to protect my family. And then I remember growing up and being like, zombies probably aren't that practical. And then I found this podcast labeled Modern Day Zombies. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. And it went over how like the real zombie is the person who's not prepared. They're ill prepared and they loot or they steal from those who are prepared. And so that kind of drove me back into this idea of preparedness, wanting to not only be able to protect myself and my family, but also do basic life needs like eat and drink water. So it kind of, it's opened up this door to wanting to bring more clarity to this topic. So if you don't mind, I'm going to put you on the spot. How do you personally define preparedness?
So, personally, I would say it's a hard question because it's a little bit different
Right?
for everybody. But for me personally, I think being prepared has to do with being prepared for any unexpected emergency. So there's a certain level of preparedness that I have when I go out hiking in the wilderness, because if I fall and break my leg, am I going to be able to get myself to safety or get in contact with emergency services? Like, what if you don't have service and you have to use your radio, you have to use satellite communicator? So I think there's a certain level of preparedness that you have to have, whether you're hiking, camping, or if you're stocking stuff at your house for, I don't know, a tornado or whatever it is. So to summarize, what would I say preparedness is? I would just say having not only the tools, but also being able to use those tools and be educated on what could happen and what you're going to do in the event of that emergency, and really planning prior to it, if that makes sense.
Absolutely, it does. And so, because there is such a spectrum, right? Okay, actually, let's do this first. I'm curious. Obviously, I prepared very, very much for this question here. So would you say there are categories to preparedness? So like natural disaster all the way to like extreme civil unrest? Is there like a spectrum?
For sure, yeah. I think there's definitely a spectrum, and people prepare at different levels, depending on, like, it's funny to me when I talk about people about preparedness, because a lot of people have this like specific thing in their head, like you were talking about the zombie apocalypse.
Yes.
And there's a lot of people who saw a movie or whatever it is, and they have like a very specific scenario in their head that they think is going to happen, and when in reality there's so many different things that could happen. So I really try to focus on being ready for any situation. And yeah, I don't know. It's a hard question, because people do have different levels of preparedness, but really it can all feed into the other one. Like, if I'm prepared for the zombie apocalypse and I have all these radios, I have all this stuff, I'm also prepared if I go out camping or hiking for an emergency to occur, because hopefully I have emergency food, I have emergency radio, all that stuff. So they kind of all feed into each other. I think the biggest gap is just in what activities people actually participate in. Like, are you actively training and practicing, or are you just stockpiling for the zombie apocalypse?
Fantastic. Okay. And zombie apocalypse now maybe defined as like the people who aren't ready. Maybe like when we refer to that now in this episode, that's maybe what we mean. I don't know. But I think it's an interesting touch point of like, yeah, that's what people like prepare for.
And people don't realize how quick that can happen, like the civil unrest that is going to occur when an emergency happens. Like, we even saw it with the Maui fires. That was a very short, quick emergency, and just within that short period of time, there were people that were looting, there were people getting robbed at gunpoint, there was all kinds of crazy stuff going on. We saw it during Hurricane Katrina, and so people don't realize how quick that civil unrest can really occur, and what are you going to do in the event of that? Because it's not always going to be the perfect scenario that I'm at my house and my whole family's here and we're just like defending it with our guns. You might be at home, your kid might be at school, your wife might be somewhere else. And so I think it's really important to kind of look back historically on things that have happened, like Hurricane Katrina, like the Maui fires. Another good one that I think is really interesting is like the Bosnian War, which happened in the 90s. There's a ton of information on that and how those communities actually came together, almost like in a way that you would think of Neighborhood Watch. They were coming together to do security, but they were also bartering with each other. All these things that happened, and ultimately a lot of how these people succeeded and how these communities succeeded came down to having like a trusted, trained network and community.
That's fantastic. Yeah. And I love these. Thank you. I was going to ask you about some real world scenarios, and I love that you have, some for us to have as a touch point. It kind of sounds like this idea of preparedness comes down to the individual kind of auditing their lives. Like, what do I do on a daily basis? And then maybe kind of scaling out from that, right? If I go and I do activities like camping or like maybe some higher level hiking, all the way into, where I live geographically and what could happen on the natural disaster level, on the civil unrest level. Like, do you recommend people take almost inventory in that way?
For sure. Yeah, so we actually developed, I co-founded a company called Frontline Preparedness, and we're currently getting our website together right now. We do some in-person courses, but we created this binder. Essentially, it's called the playbook. It's your family standard operating procedure, and it's a fill in the blanks thing where you just fill out all the information with your family, and then you can just pass one out to all of your family members. And I would say that's really, going through that will open your eyes as to like how unprepared you are when it comes to like link up procedures and all that kind of stuff. You're like, I didn't even think about this before. And so I think that's a really good way to kind of audit yourself, inventory everything you physically have, as well as what your skill set is, as well as like what the rest of your family is capable of doing. And I think that's the best way to go about it, because otherwise, to try to just like go through it yourself and pick through stuff, there's just so much information and so many things that you wouldn't necessarily expect to happen.
I love that. Yeah, a lot of the communication happens early. This is a conversation that I try to have with my family sometimes, and they've never been as like preparedness minded as me. I have a sister whose husband is very, preparedness minded. I don't know. I'm gonna come up with a better
something like that.
Something like that. Has a mind for that, and it wasn't until recently I moved away from home from Arkansas to Utah, and my mom and I have been talking about. First of all, I want to give context. You just talked about communicating with family. I live alone. I have a boyfriend I definitely want to have a game plan with in town. But I think about my family who's far away, and moving from like Arkansas to Utah was kind of this, it brought a lot of feelings of anxiety, because I was like, I don't have my mom like, down the road from me, or even just like 30 minutes from me. She's now states away. I wonder, is this guide going to be available as well for families that are spread out and want to have a central form of communication?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, so this guide can apply
fantastic.
to anyone. It can be if you have your mom living, I don't know, overseas, she's living 800 miles away, whatever it is. It helps you develop that plan, because one of the big gaps I've seen, and one of the biggest questions I get whenever I start talking about radios, is like what you're saying. I live in a different state than my mom, and how am I going to contact her in the event of an emergency? And a lot of times people are like, my mom doesn't know how to use a radio. It's like a common thing. And so one of the big things I really push with people is satellite communication, especially if you have like parents that are older and may not be so radio savvy, because at the end of the day, if there was like a world ending scenario and you didn't have cell reception, you're down to radios. And technically, a lot of radios, like the standard bow thing that you see people use when they're talking long distances, they're using repeaters. And hopefully the repeaters don't go down, but they could go down, and they're not something that you personally have control of. And it also takes a little bit of skill to use. You could set it up for your mom ahead of time, but it gets a little dicey. The other option that wouldn't rely on any outside sources would be HF communication. And that in itself is a whole other animal that it's hard to do. You have to have like some experience to do. It's an awesome thing. It's super cool because you don't need to use repeaters. It actually bounces off the ionosphere. It's a really cool thing to look into and like get into, and you can totally nerd out on it. But in terms of like having a parent or grandparent, I'm a big advocate for satellite communication. If there was a war, yes, technically satellite communication could be taken down. It doesn't happen very often at all, but it could be taken down by another country. But it's going to be the easiest way for them to communicate with you generally, because you just pick that thing up and you use it like a phone. You're not having to do all this stuff, and that requires really a license for. And in the event of emergency, I know people get controversial about this, but in the event of emergency, you do not have to have a license to use a radio and call for help. That's in the FCC rules. You do not have to have one. But that being said, if you haven't been trained with a radio prior to an emergency, you're probably going to have difficulty using it in the event of an emergency, especially for any kind of longer distance communication.
Absolutely. And for people who maybe this is a completely new topic to them, they're listening and they're like already confused. And I mean, don't get me wrong, I also am a little confused. Like, I have some clarifying questions I want to ask, but I have looked into this probably more than the average Joe, because I want a way to communicate with my mom being so far away. So for those listening who maybe don't know the limitations on certain devices with distance, or maybe certain devices due to the training needed, how would you maybe create like
categorize
a spectrum? Yeah, maybe categorize, or maybe spectrum from like, shorter distances to like being states or overseas, maybe however you want to kind of explain it. Would you mind kind of walking us through that?
Yeah, so the easiest way I would say to explain it is that like most radios that you're going to see are going to be line of sight. So they're going to go as far as the eye can see. Once you hit the horizon, once the earth begins to curve, they're not going to continue. So if you want to be able to speak any further than that distance, you're going to need something like a repeater. And that's going to allow you to speak longer distances. The thing with those repeaters is that they're not controlled by you. People put repeaters everywhere. Like, for example, I think a good example of this for people who use like GMRS is one, or you can use the Baofeng radios. But in terms of like GMRS, let's say if you go onto I think it's called mygmrs.com, you can see all the repeaters in your immediate area, and it'll kind of give you an idea of what you can use. Yeah, so that's like one resource. You can, like I said, you can also do it with your Baofeng radios too. This is just a GMRS example. But generally speaking, you're dealing with line of sight, which is pretty short, especially if you're in a city. Like if you're standing on one side of a mountain and I'm trying to talk to you on the other side of the mountain, it's not going to penetrate. So that's where HF comes in, really. That does not require any repeaters. One example of like an HF transceiver would be like the Xiegu X6100. ICOM also makes them if you want to like look them up just to see what they look like. And they're super cool. They do require a license technically to use, and honestly, if you don't have a license, you're probably not going to be able to use it. There's all kinds of different antenna configurations, all different stuff you do with it. But the cool thing with HF is, unlike most other radios, which are line of sight or require a repeater, is that it bounces off the ionosphere. So it allows you to talk essentially around the world without having to rely on any other resource. And there is things with like, the earth and like solar flares and crazy stuff that can affect HF, but it's not going to be affected by humans taking it down like they could take down repeaters or take down satellite communication.
Interesting. Okay, so okay.
I know, sorry, this is like, you can go in a lot of holes. I'm trying to stay kind of vague with it so it makes sense, but there's a lot of information with the radios.
You're doing a great job. I think I got lost in the sauce around, so is HF ham?
So they kind of like, everybody will be like, oh, this is ham radio. Technically, you need a ham license, but it's a higher level license for HF.
HF, okay. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it's an even higher level license.
And HF is not quite satellite, right? You said it's ionosphere.
It bounces off the ionosphere. So like a good example of it would be like if you're using a regular radio, it's going to like, it's not going to bounce off the ionosphere. It'll just go off into the distance and you're done once you hit the horizon. Whereas if HF, I could actually bounce it off the ground. I could bounce it off the ground and it can go. So it also bounces in the air and then it goes like this and it bounces.
Interesting.
And so that's why it's able to travel so far, is because it's not just going to, go off into the distance like a regular GMRS, FRS, UHF, VHF, that kind of thing.
Okay. And then as far as distance beyond that being traveled, satellite would be like the next.
Yeah, satellite. Step? I am a huge advocate for satellite. I love satellite communication. I think it's so slept on. People should talk about it more because satellite communication is so easy to use. Like I have the Spot X satellite communicator, which I like because it has a keyboard on it, so you can like text straight from it, which is kind of nice. Garmin also has quite a few that people use a lot, and that's really able to talk as long as you want. It could talk around the world, and it's just so user friendly. I mean, it's like using your iPhone. So it's the easiest one. It doesn't require a license. I think people shy away from it because it can be a little bit more pricey, whereas like you can go pick up a Baofeng for like $15, Right. But in the event of an emergency, like that's when I go hiking, that's my primary thing that I would use if something happened to me and I need to get in contact with emergency services and I didn't have cell reception. I would go to a satellite communicator because it could just communicate the longer distances. It's so easy to use. So I would say, especially for people who have family that lives far away, or you have grandma or whoever, not everybody's a ham radio operator, I would highly recommend looking into satellite communication.
Wonderful. And thank you so much, by the way, for going into depth on this. You're very much an expert in this, so I know it's hard to like come down and be like, okay, let's say they know nothing.
Well, and it's such a sensitive topic too. People get like really sensitive about, like this, how they feel about, ham radio operators are like really love ham radio stuff. And so I try to be careful in like how I say things, because everybody has their different opinions on what they think would work best or what they set up for their family. But I just go from the place of, you don't know, let's say you don't know how to do anything. This is where
Right.
you should start, you know?
Yes, absolutely. I deal with that a lot in the gun industry. And like the way I've learned to do it is, first of all, it's my platform, right? So like I can talk about what I want. That's the whole point of being here. And same with you today. Like you're the guest speaker. You get to share your opinions, and like you can be honest about like what's subjective and what's objective. But I think you're doing a great job at explaining like pros and cons and like applications. And like I don't think anyone could get upset at that. I think this is great information. So I appreciate that. It sounds like redundancy is a recurring theme here, like
For sure.
having multiple modes of communication depending on distance, depending on accessibility, and of course who you're trying to communicate with. So in your personal life, I know you've said a few examples of like, this is what I use. Could you talk about how you've built out redundancy when it comes to communication?
Yeah, for sure. And I'm glad you said that, because one of the biggest questions I get from people is like, what radio should I buy? And they just want me to tell them like, this is the one end all be all that'll fix all your problems. And
Right.
it's like, I don't know what your scenario is, what you're planning for. I don't know where your mom is. You know, it's like, there's
Right.
so many things that can happen. So for me, and redundancy is huge. Like, my boyfriend was in the military, and he will tell you a million times that the military loves redundancy. So he's like obsessed with redundancy. I can't even tell you how many different radios we have. So it's crazy. But I would say like my first form of communication is obviously, if you use your phone works, use your phone. My second one, in the event of an emergency where I'm trying to call for help, is going to be satellite communicator, because 9 times out of 10 that's going to work. If there's a tornado, earthquake, whatever it is, you're going to be able to use your satellite communicator. Then after that, I would move to a radio, and that kind of depends on what your level of like education is on it and who you're trying to get in contact with. You know, we do radio stuff all the time where we're just trying to talk to each other, you know, short distances, and we just use little GMRS radios. So depends what you're trying to do. There's a lot of different avenues you could go down, and I always tell people like, feel free to reach out to me if you have questions about radios, because we could dive in on, we've tested just about every radio, and we can really dive in on what exactly would probably fit your plan. Because there's also a lot of people who think, because I do emergency preparedness, they're thinking like about if they're trying to hide from somebody or doing some sort of level of like reconnaissance and stuff, which is a whole different spectrum. Obviously, I'm not going to be just like texting you on my phone. If I'm doing that, really, I should just try not to talk on the radio very much at all if I'm doing something like that where I don't want to be caught.
Right.
So there's a few different things you could go down, and then you get into the legal side of it, which is like, legally, you're not allowed to, you know, do this or that. And so, yeah, there's a whole bunch of avenues, but I would say primarily use your phone if an emergency happens. If your phone doesn't work, use satellite communicator, and then after that, you can start getting into radios, and that's what I would do.
Fantastic. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. I feel like that's a really good way to not just summarize everything you said, but like see that application of everything you just mentioned into one. So I super appreciate that. I want to make sure I ask this before we kind of pivot a bit. For someone listening who maybe wants to get in direct contact with you about specific questions they have that are maybe more niche, or they want to just like train with you one-on-one, where should they go to do that? And of course, I'll link this in the show notes. So, you know, you don't need to give like websites or anything. I'll make sure I link it. But how would they kind of access you for that?
Yeah, I would say just message me on social media, on my Instagram usually, at Tactical Belle, and I try to get back to people as much as I can. Sometimes my inbox gets a little crazy, which I'm sure you're familiar with too. But
yes.
I do my best to try to get back to real questions that people have and kind of try to guide them through it. And that's really the purpose of us creating our company. And we're getting ready to launch our website soon for that, to be able to go more in depth and have these one-on-one meetings with people, and also provide classes that hopefully answer most of the general questions, because I get a lot of the same question, because a lot of people have the same question or confusion about these topics.
Absolutely. That's so exciting, by the way. I love that you're creating a templated way. And yes, that will help your inbox so much. That's honestly led me to build my website too, because I'm like, it's all the same questions. And so you almost want to be like, I already answered this, but you can't expect them to like find that answer in a comment from like a year ago. So
exactly. That's what happens. I'm like, I already actually did a video on that, but then it's like, you have to scroll back 100 videos. And it's like, I want to answer all people's questions because it's such an important topic.
Yeah.
But, yeah, sometimes it's hard. So hopefully the website will organize it a little bit more for people.
That's fantastic. I'm really excited for you. And I will make sure to link, at least for now, like your socials and any other links you have available so people can stay in contact with you. we have so many directions we can go from here. I feel like we kind of started this off by hitting comms as like the one of,
A big one.
Yes, a big category. So actually, I'll ask you, where would you want to go from here when it comes to preparedness on like the basic level, food and water, when it comes to being prepared tactically with maybe firearms? I know, before the episode, you kind of sent out what you wanted to talk about and accessibility to training and things like that. But what would you say you'd want to start with next?
I think maybe it would be good to go into things like land navigation and kind of like link up procedures with your family, because I think that's something that's something I love, and it's something that's really not pushed enough because we're so used to just having our phones for maps and all that.
Yeah, girl, I have had to use my Apple Maps to get to my jujitsu gym, which is right next to my gym, like almost every time until recently. And I've lived here like a year and a half. So I'm pretty embarrassed to admit that, but I also think some of the listeners might be relating to this right now. So that's a way to say you're not alone. But let's talk about the real world application of like not being navigation savvy. I know, just a quick aside, when I moved to Utah, my uncle panicked. He was kind of like a stand-in a little bit for my dad when I was younger, and like when he heard I was moving away, he like showed up with a road atlas and he was like, "Do you know how to use this?" And I was like, "Yes." And he was like, "I know you don't, like you need to learn this," and all of that. So it's kind of interesting, especially I'm Gen Z. I don't know what
I am
generation
too. I'm Gen
you
Z
are.
also.
Okay, so you
Yep.
get it. Like it is
Yo,
so
I totally
rare.
get
Like,
it.
oh my gosh. So just like we talked about with comms, kind of the spectrum when it comes to navigation, like what is the spectrum ranging from Apple Maps to like being able to read a topographic map, would you say?
Yeah.
And maybe that's not the end of the spectrum. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good comparison, is like we're used to using Apple Maps. And then, like, the thing that I thought was really crazy, because we've been to, like, quite a few national parks lately, and they give you these maps that don't even have grid lines on them. They're, like, not topographic maps. And I'm like, what a crazy thing that you're sending me out here hiking and giving me this map, and it doesn't even have grid lines on it. And so, so I think that's why I'm like, okay, land navigation needs to be talked about more, because we need to normalize everybody being able to plot a coordinate on a map. And really, I would push for all of these national parks to just put some grid lines on your map. It's not that hard. You could get them for free. So I'm a big advocate for the way I learned land navigation was because I used to be horrible at navigation. I'm still not going to say I'm the best when I'm like driving, but I can read like a map when I'm actually doing land nav out hiking. It's a weird thing. I don't know.
Sure.
But the way I learned was from geocaching, actually. Which I don't know if you've heard of that.
I have. That's where someone
okay.
like plants a prize and then you have to find it based on clues or... Okay.
Exactly. Yes, that's exactly
cool.
it.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's actually how I learned. We were out hiking a bunch because we had just got our dog, and he's a cattle dog, so he's absolutely crazy. So we were hiking all the time. Yeah. And so I started making maps on, one of the big ones I like to use is Caltopo because it's free. You can actually go on their website. It's just caltopo.com. You put in your location, and then it'll come up with the map, and you can change it to different sizes. You can pick all kinds of preferences on there, and then you can print it at home for free. Or like my hack, I guess you could say, that I like to do is I download it and then I upload it to the Staples website, you know, like Staples where you have stuff printed and buy paper products and stuff. I upload it to their website. Yeah, and people are always surprised, like, what, Staples? But yeah, I upload it to their website. No, I know,
it's not everywhere, so I'm glad you clarified. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm like, people are probably gonna be like, what are you talking about, Staples? But if you upload it to their website, they'll print it for you, and it's like $5, and you can get it on larger paper. You can have it laminated. It'll be printed the same day. So that was the route that I went, and I encourage everyone to do that because you should have a printed map of your area in case of an emergency, like of your home area. But I started making my maps on there, and I have a couple tutorials on like how to make a map on there on my page if anybody gets confused, because it can be a little confusing the first time you use it. But I would print maps from there from where we were hiking, and then I would go on the geocaching app. And how geocaching works, like you said, is people hide little like trinkets and stuff like that, and so it gives you the coordinates. So I would take the coordinates off there and I would plot them on the map and create a route, make a route card, all of that, and then we'd just go out hiking and we'd find them. And it was so fun because you actually find something. You're not just like, I'm just walking to nowhere. And so that was ultimately how I learned to land nav. And I think like the first year we did it, we found like over 100 geocaches because I was just like super into it at the time.
Okay, first of all, so freaking cool. That's so cool. Thanks for sharing that. Okay, before we get back to the official stuff, what's the coolest
Yeah.
thing you found, or like a top three?
You know what? I don't know. Okay, some of the people have like told me they were like, oh, I found money, I found this and that. For whatever reason, all the geocaches in my area, I swear to God, they have been there for like 20 years. Like all of them are
Oh
so
my
old.
gosh,
Yeah,
really?
which is cool. But then it's like they don't have much stuff left in them, obviously, because people kind of like take trinkets out, put stuff in, or whatever.
Yeah,
So I haven't
yeah.
found any like cash prizes or anything. But
Got
it's more
you.
just been cool finds that are like I think it's cool how people hide them. Like, some people are really crazy. Like, I think one guy must have a 3D printer because he was, like, cutting stuff out and, like, making it look like the object and then putting it to it. And I was like, or somebody put, like, a fake rock. They actually put a fake rock in all the rocks, like, buried within the rocks. And I don't even know how we found it. So it's kind of cool when people, just to see how creative people are with it.
That is so interesting. And so do you think I know nothing about the origination of the idea. Is it to promote things like land nav?
I don't know. It's hard to say because I will say from like my personal experience of talking to other people that I've just like randomly ran into when I'm hiking that are geocaching that mostly use. It's weird that I run into other people that do it too. I'm like,
That's awesome.
yeah, but they're mostly using their phone, which like
cool.
I promote
Sure.
any kind of like, yeah, it's great to just go out there and do it. But like, if you actually want to land nav, plot it on your, usually I'll plot it on my map. And then when I was learning, I'd also plot it on like my GPS so I could like double check myself on there.
Yeah.
But I really promote plotting it on a map. And from most of the geocaching I've seen, people mostly just use their phone. So I don't actually know why it was created, but I would assume it had to be originally something to do with land navigation because I don't know why else you would be doing it, but
Yeah. That's super interesting. Okay. And I wonder, my guy and I were out hiking the other day, and on the way back from the top of the hike, when you're like on a hike and you're enjoying that one spot you find and you're just staring at the views, and you eventually get to the point where you're like, I am too tired. Like, if I stay here any longer, the hike down will be miserable. Like, it's time to go.
yes.
So
Yeah.
we were pretty exhausted, and he's hiking with one arm. He's got an arm in a sling right now. We like rock climbed, and I was like, well, here we go. I might have to carry him back down. But with all that said, we go back down, and this guy, he's got a kid on his back. He's walking up towards us, and he's like, did you guys find the treasure? We were like, what? And he was like, yeah, there's $25,000 hidden in like
What?
Farmington Canyon, which is like a huge canyon close to where I live. And yeah, and we were like, no, we were exhausted at that point, so we were like, we don't even have the energy to like look this up. But
Yeah.
I thought that was kind of interesting. So someone had like planted a treasure of like 25 grand.
That's
I don't know if
awesome.
it's been found. We didn't like look it up, but I wonder if it is something related, like if land nav would be good for that, or if it's just
Yeah.
apparently it had to do with a poem. Like, it started with a poem, and then if you
Okay.
figured that out, it was like a little bit of
Like a
true
puzzle.
scavenger hunt. Yeah.
Yeah.
Puzzle.
There's some of those on some of those on the geocaching app. Like, there's some where they just straight up give you the coordinates, and then there's other ones where they have, like you said, they have like a poem and all that stuff.
Huh.
And yeah, I think in those cases, land nav would probably be beneficial because you never know what hints you're going to get in there from the poem in terms of like
Yeah.
identifying other land features in the area
Yeah.
and stuff like that. But it would definitely be a good land nav exercise to go out there and look
Yeah.
for it.
That's so fun. I'll have to call him after this. I always do after my guest speaker episodes, to be like, it went so well. But I'll call him after, and I'll have to tell him about this.
Yes,
That's
if there's
so
still
awesome.
$25,000 there, maybe
Yeah,
I'll
I know
come
what
out
we're
to
doing
visit
this
you and we
weekend.
could go look.
I was about to say, you absolutely should. Yes. Oh
Yeah.
my gosh. I'll look it up after this. I'll let you know what I find about it. I'll send you a link or something. But
Yeah, for sure.
I don't think we ever looked into it, but we were definitely curious. Just, yeah, we ended up going to get pizza, and then my brain just,
You were like, yeah.
pizza. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
No, yes. No, that's so cool. Okay, so where do I want to go from there? The link you mentioned, I'll find a video that you've done on, how to actually use that.
Make a map.
link. Well,
Yeah.
yeah, make the map. Okay, yes, I know what I wanted to ask you. So you said you should make an app of your local area. So what are some things, once you have this map made and, say someone follows your tutorial step by step, what should be marked on the map theoretically, and then maybe like a why? This is so new to me
Yeah.
that I don't even know. The questions aren't really coming out that great, but
No,
what do
for
you
sure.
mark?
Yeah, so, and we put that in our binder too to kind of address that for people is how you actually do like where your meeting points are and stuff like
Mhm.
that. And that's a big thing, I think, is going over with your family, like points that you could meet at in the event of an emergency, you know, have like a first one, a secondary, or whatever, in case your first one doesn't work out. So I think it's important to mark those points. Another thing that I really advocate for is people stockpile a lot of stuff in their house, but like, what if an emergency happens and you can't get back to your house burns down, whatever it is. I'm big on, I always want to say caching, but I think the right way to say it is caching, where you like actually
Okay.
store stuff in another place. And so I highly recommend doing that, whether, you know, you're burying it or whatever you're doing. And that you're probably going to want to mark on a map because you might forget that just you and your spouse have. So those would be some important things, I think, to mark on your map.
Absolutely. And then is there an incident in which you would, recommend marking like local stores? I know that's hard to say. We haven't gotten into like the food discussion yet. Hopefully,
Yeah, for sure.
the listeners prepared to the point where they have stores of food in a few locations. But would you say like certain local like mom and pops and or hospitals, anything like that, that should be also marked?
Yeah, for sure. No, all of that is good to be marked on there. When you actually make your map on Caltopo, a lot of that stuff should be marked to some level. It kind of depends how detailed you go in with your map, but like if there's important points, it'll have like important features on there a lot of times. Even like trails, it'll like mark down to trails on there and stuff. But for sure,
Oh.
it's good to mark like if your hospital will definitely be on there. If it's not marked enough for you to see it well, for sure plot that on there. And also another thing that's good to put is what your routes to your hospital are. Like I'm sure you guys do this at the range. Whenever we go out to the range, we have a plan for if somebody gets injured,
Mm-hmm.
if we're going to have to take them to the hospital. And there's always a plan for, okay, this is the primary hospital that we're going to go to. This is the route that we're going to take to get there. And so I think that's another good thing to put in there.
Absolutely. And I feel like this, you talked about maybe being away from home or maybe not even wanting to stay planted, right?
Right.
Do you use the terms bugging in and bugging out?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, you do. Okay, very cool. And I've learned that not everyone knows what that means. So, like, my definition at least, bugging in means as far as your preparedness efforts go, it's with the idea that you'll be staying at home if there's some type of disaster, which we're not really defining yet. But bug out is more so you have like a secondary location and then you're, preparing the necessary gear to get to that secondary location that may also have like gear stored there. Is that kind of roughly how you define those two?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, definitely. And I think that's another important thing to establish. And we've tried to put like things in place like within people's binder to fill out because different people have different standards depending on their situation, but
Right.
you should have planned prior to an emergency, like if this sequence of events happens, that means I need to get out of here, or if these things I'm going to stay here. And I think that's a really important thing to determine prior to an emergency, because during an emergency everybody's panicking, everything's going on. It's hard to make that decision whether you should stay bug in or whether you should bug out. And there's also different levels of that too. If I bug out, I might have to go on foot. That might be the situation. I might have my car. Another cool thing that we've been working on, this really cool project that's up and coming on my page, we've been working with a company on building essentially an emergency trailer. Like you could call it a bug out trailer. Yeah, and there's different levels of it because to some degree, if you're camping in a trailer, even you should have emergency supplies in your trailer because anything could happen. But if you were in a bug out situation, something like a trailer or an RV would be great for that, because realistically, if you think about how much gear and food and just stuff you have, I can barely fit all my gear and targets for the range in the back of my car. So
Right.
You're going to want something a little bit bigger to store that stuff in, and even better if you can actually sleep in it. So I think it's good to like think about what your terms are for, like, if these happen, I'm going to bug in. If this happens, I'm going to bug out. And then what am I taking? Am I going to take a trailer? Am I going to be on foot? All those different potential options.
Absolutely. And when I lived in Arkansas, to kind of like give a little bit of like my backstory here and maybe build off of that, my family has land in about 30 miles from my mom's home. And so when I was I think I was in junior high, I actually mapped out, I like printed off some maps and highlighted a route for us to get there that avoided like a major highway. I communicated with my family out in Oklahoma that, we would be coming to them. My mom and I started kind of preparing with some emergency food. I I didn't have any weapons yet. I did archery. And so I'm so glad I didn't know that couldn't do anything with this, but I had like a 35-pound recurve bow with like training arrows. And I was like, haha, I've got everybody, don't worry. Which nowadays, like, obviously I know that was not probably going to do anything, except for maybe piss somebody off. But I did have, a little bit of a plan, and I even mapped out like local mom and pop stores, and like I did a lot for like a junior high
That's
school
awesome.
kid.
No, you were way ahead of your time. You were ahead of like most adults I know preparing.
Thanks. Yeah. And when I left Arkansas, now I'm like, well, I don't know what to do. I mean, I live 5 miles from Lena Michelik, which is, pretty convenient.
Oh yeah, she's awesome. Yeah,
she's dope. She's actually why I moved out here, and like, I haven't even had the conversation with her as to, like what we would do in a situation, even though that would be a house that I definitely want to go to. But in my own apartment now, like, this is what I've done so far, just to give context. I think this is kind of fun. I have these, like, when you like buy the juice jars, like the like the natural organic glass jar, juice thingies, I fill those up. I have like a reverse osmosis filter, and I probably buy like 2 of those a week. And so you can imagine how many I've accrued. I always keep my glass because they don't recycle that here, and I always find ways to recycle it. And like, not to brag, but anyway, so I fill that up with reverse osmosis water, like, purified water. And then I have this random cabinet in my kitchen that I've always just like looked at and never known how to use it, because it's weirdly narrow, but like very spacious in the back. And I've just slowly been storing food and water in there. I have some camping gear that I keep indoors. Like you said, I can't keep my camping stuff in my car, because then I couldn't fit my range gear, and I couldn't fit like my gym and like my 40 activities. So I've gotten to where I just actually have a closet that's dedicated to all of that gear. And like, I know I would be able to like use my propane tanks and like heat up food if I needed to. And like, I have emergency storage food in my pantry. And like, I would say for probably my just age demographic and like location, I'm doing a pretty good job. Like, I just based off of like probably the average Joe, like if I'm comparing
for
down.
sure.
But
I
have felt a little insecure with like, what if I can't stay here? Like, I can't I like crack myself up because I'm like, I can't carry down these 50 jars of water and like these like massive tubs of like emergency dried food and like these ammo cans of ammo. Like, I've really thought about, if stuff goes sideways, and then beyond that, where would I even drive to, right? Like, I don't even have a secondary location. And so for someone who's maybe in my situation, and I'm just kind of exposing myself here because I think it's a really good example, and I also have no shame. Obviously, I have a podcast. So I think this could be a good example of like, where would you start if you were me and you had these thoughts of like, I can't carry the glass jars down, and I can't, I don't maybe have a secondary location.
No, for sure. And I'm glad you asked that question, because that's a huge thing I feel like is lacking in a lot of like the preparedness and just like survivalist community in general that I see, is they're really focused on like individual survivalism. And like, I'm all for that. I love the idea of like homesteading, have your own animals, grow all your own food, do the whole thing. But in reality, you're going to have a hard time if it's just you as an individual, or, you and your spouse, and something massive occurs. Really, who's going to thrive is going to be these communities that are trusted communities that have come together. And so like, I'm a big advocate for building a community around you, whether that's like hopefully some people that are already trained in a lot of those fields, but even training people yourself. Like you said, you're not too far from Lena, so having a plan with her of like, hey, this is where we're going to meet up, all that kind of stuff. Maybe keeping some stuff in a secondary location, because like you said, in an event of emergency, you're not going to be able to carry it all down. So having some stuff in a place, whether that's buried out in the dirt somewhere at a location that only you and a couple other people know, or maybe it's at her house because that's going to be your main meeting point. Like, we have a main meeting point area for our family that it's like everybody's going to try to get to this location. If like all hell broke loose, the world ended, like how are we going to come back together? Where would we want to all end up? So kind of having a plan in place of like, where would we want to be in the end of this, and setting things up to lead you to that place, if that makes sense.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I actually, my guy and his family, they have a really tight-knit church community. Well, his parents do at least, and he lives really close to them. And we were all at dinner the other day, and they're so new to the gun world. They're like, so do you have a gun on you right now? And I'm like, yeah. They're like, oh, very cool. Why is that? I'm like, well, like, even though we're here, like someone, home intrusion, all that stuff. I'm like explaining all this to them, and they're like, well, like, how do you do with preparedness? And I told them about you coming on, by the way. I was like, oh, this is like interesting timing.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah. And I asked them, like, what do you all have in mind about that? And they're like, actually, we have a community, and they explained how their neighborhood, like almost every neighbor for miles, like they know almost everyone, like everyone's so connected. It's an old community. And I suddenly felt very small. I was like, damn, because they were talking about how if there was a medical need, they know like which house that would come from. And like if they needed to trade for something, they know like who to go talk to. And it hit me that like I actually lack that community aspect. Like obviously Lena's an amazing person, and she would not be surprised if like over
if you like knocked on her door.
Yeah. Oh, 1,000%. Or like we're just chilling, we're eating some tacos, and I'm like, hey, so if the world ends, right? And she would be like, yeah, let's talk about this. She's a great person for that. But I've considered, like, I think that his parents' house would actually be a really great place to, if I have the time, haul some gear to. Okay, I have to tell you this. I want to just see what you think. I actually have an EMP protector in my 4Runner.
Oh, cool.
And I know that's so niche. Like most 22-year-olds are spending money on like Gymshark, right? Which I totally did as well. But I also bought a freaking $400 EMP protector and threw that thing in my car because I was like, I thought about the fact that like my car between Arkansas and Utah and like is going to be my bug out vehicle. And then I thought, well, like what if the car doesn't work? Like, and I don't know, for those that maybe don't know anything about that, would you want to share your 2 cents on that and like whether or not you recommend it? And I will not be offended if you're like, that's actually like a silly
No, 100%. No, 100%. I recommend it. Okay. People get like on me too when I start posting the EMP stuff, and they're like, "Oh, like that's so unrealistic. That's not gonna happen." But in reality, it would be a pretty like it's doable, and it would be a smart thing to do if you were trying to take out a society. I mean, that would take out so many people.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah. So I'm huge. I think that's awesome. We have some like backpacks. I think the company's like SLNT, I think they're like a big one. They have some backpacks. Yeah, so we have some of theirs. We throw like radios and stuff like in that. My boyfriend actually built like a big table that we can like store the generator and stuff like that in case of an EMP.
What?
Yeah,
that's
and so
I
cool.
think, oh my god.
Yeah, he's like all into that stuff, and people are now like, "Oh, how did you build this?" And I'm like, I don't really know how he built that. I'm gonna have to learn, and then I'll get back to you on that.
Sure.
But it's a good thing to think about, because in reality, that's a super like huge thing that is totally possible and would be a smart thing for people to do, and that could affect all of your electronics. That could affect your generator, that could affect your radios, and you're gonna have no communication, and like you said, your car. And so I think that's a good idea. I'm pro EMP stuff.
Okay, fantastic. I do need to check on it though, because I do think it's draining my battery, and that is not like, I don't think that's right. Like that's not supposed to really be happening. I think I may have connected it to the wrong thing, but I don't know.
I'm not gonna say I don't. Yeah, I would. Yeah. I'm not an expert on cars, so I'm not sure. But yeah, that sounds like totally probably fair. Something not right.
It only started happening after I installed it, so I was like,
okay, so you're like,
yeah, it's one of those things. You're like, this is no, because it's like so the timeline is so like okay,
it's
but
so
I
close.
need to get it checked on. But that is not something it does when installed correctly. Let me be very clear. Okay, very cool. I'm glad we touched on that. I didn't actually.
No, for sure.
Didn't even write down to like bring that up today. And I hope I haven't derailed you too much. I think land nav kind of led me to think like, okay, some people are thinking they're going to be at home. And I think a lot of people think that your home is your comfort place. But like, if the natural disaster or say like a strike of some sort, whatever weaponry, whether it be like biological or, all the other types of weaponry out there, happened, exactly where you live, there would hopefully be a secondary spot. So that kind of led me to that. For someone who's listening and they're like, oh man, like, well, I need a community, where would you recommend how did they start
finding
that maybe? Yeah.
Yeah, you can find them near you. there's a lot of like, I would say like the ham operator community is huge into like emergency preparedness. They actually help a lot of people in emergencies. Like they were helping a lot when Hurricane Katrina happened in terms of like assisting in getting information from people and getting emergency services to help people out there that were stranded or whatever the case was during Hurricane Katrina. So the ham operator community really does serve a huge purpose when it comes to emergencies like Hurricane Katrina, where emergency services are just so overloaded and they
Sure.
have the capabilities to get that information and help people out. So I highly recommend looking into that. Another big thing I recommend looking into that won't necessarily get you in a group, but it will get you a lot of information, is if you look up your county Office of Emergency Services. So just whatever your, let's say your San Diego County Office of Emergency Services. Google that. They'll have all kinds of information in terms of like what radio frequencies, what their actual plan is. So you can know what your county's plan is going to be, what they're going to do, where they're going to be housing people in the event of an emergency, which I think is all beneficial information that you can kind of take and add into your plan. The biggest thing I would say though is take those with a grain of salt, because the County Office of Emergency Services are fantastic and some I'm sure are better than others, but they do lack some things when it comes to like your personal plan, and that's really why we developed our company, was kind of to address all the things that they were lacking in there. So that I would kind of like say take it with a grain of salt, and then also build your own emergency plan, have your family playbook. And we also have this thing, we developed an acronym actually at our company, Frontline Preparedness, and it's called COAST, and it stands for Current Condition, Objective, Action Plan, Supplies and Services, and then Team Structure and Communication. And
fantastic.
yeah, so it's basically just a simple plan that, whoops, I'm like knocking my camera over.
You're totally
It just provides like a simple, repeatable process for assessing the situation, communication, all that kind of stuff, and linking up with your family. And it actually addresses that issue versus just like, where are we sheltering? How much food do we have? How much water do we have? This is like, you can actually put this plan in place if you're say your kid's missing during an emergency. This is the plan that you're going to follow to be able to go find your kid and be able to execute that correctly.
That's fantastic. Oh my gosh. I honestly, not to say I didn't expect this because you're not, knowledgeable or something. I just didn't expect you to hit me with like, yeah, like ham radio people and like go to your county's resources. Like that's fantastic. I've never heard of this. And like, I'm like kind of mind blown.
No, I'm a huge advocate for that. The ham radio community, I would say ham radio community is great. Your local Office of Emergency Services is great. Make your own plan. That's the best thing that you can do. And then, you can find other like-minded people around you. Like, you build your own community if you want to. Right. Because there's a lot of good groups out there, but it depends where you live. You're in Utah. There's a huge group in Utah. But yeah, it just depends where you live.
That's fantastic. When you say there's a huge group, what do you mean by that?
So there's a lot of... in Utah, there's a lot of like emergency preparedness groups. There's one in particular I know with that Brave Lizard Tactical is affiliated with, and those guys are awesome. You got a lot of experience in terms of a lot of former special operations guys in that community, and so I could definitely afterwards talk to you a little bit and send you some information so you can link in with them. But I'm a huge advocate for, if you live in Utah, link in with them, because they are so prepared for emergencies, and they're just good people that are trying to prepare and educate other people. They're not going to be like, oh hey, you don't know enough to be in our group. Like, they want to really lift their community up. And so yeah, I'm a huge, like, I love their range, and they're like really good people.
That's so fantastic. Yes, I would absolutely love that. I'll let them know you sent me and everything. I've wanted to do more education on preparedness, but kind of like concealed carry. I knew that it wasn't like my time to share things yet until I got more experienced. And it's hard when you're in an industry where other people maybe don't have that discernment, or they don't have the patience to wait to share information, things like that. But I've always kind of I've always prided myself on waiting until I felt like I could really back the content I deliver, like the education I give. And so it's really nice. Like, my podcast is a really incredible endeavor because I get to talk to people like you that have done the work. You're experts in your field. And, from there, I'm excited to meet these guys and connect with them. I've always kind of, at least in my immediate family group and external family, I've felt kind of like a lone wolf, I think. And then I found out back in Arkansas, I found out like right when I was moving that I had an uncle who had like tons of acreage and a little homestead and like was a prepper for like his whole life, like ex-military. And I was like, you never told me about this guy. Like, what the heck?
Yeah.
I was like, who the hell's Nico? Like, why have I not heard this name, you know?
Oh my God. Yeah.
And I remember telling my mom, like, this needs to be a conversation you have with him, like building out those roadmaps. But I think it's one of those things. We live in such a fast-paced and almost like in a contradicting way, comfortable society, right? Like we're almost flooded with so much to do that this feels so intangible to start. And then at the same time, we are constantly being reinforced comfort, whether that be like scrolling on your phone and getting, you know, entertainment at your fingertips, you know, just back to back, that a lot of this goes kind of just ignored. And
Oh, for sure.
I had this whole, my guy and I had a whole, like, I live somewhere in Utah. I'm trying not to give away where I live, but I live somewhere in Utah where like we'll have like strings of jets passing by, like 10 jets back to back to back. And if you didn't know that there was, you know, a training location nearby, you would probably think the world was ending. And we were talking about ignorance and bliss and like how, like with age, like the bliss declines, the ignorance declines, and like reality settles in. But we were also talking about how like we live in a society that reinforces ignorance, like because it benefits off of that. You know what I mean? Natural disasters drive like political and financial, and I'm not here to talk politics. I don't know if you've listened to the podcast, but we almost never touch on it other than like 2A advocacy. But, you know, it drives political and financial change so that the rich, you know, rich people can stay richer and like all those things. But that aside, like this conversation alone, I hope has instigated some form of, you know, self-agency to the listener to like at least take an audit. Like, I think, would you say that that's like where you should start, just kind of auditing where you're at?
For sure. Yeah, I think that's the best thing to do, because honestly, you will be surprised. Like, it's not just you, it's everybody. I was surprised too when you actually go and audit yourself and see like what you're prepared for and what the situations are. Like I said, if you go through like our playbook and you start filling it out, you're going to be like, wow, I never thought of all this stuff. I never thought of all these things. And I think that's the best place to start, because then you can learn from there. Especially like one of the biggest things I hear when it comes to emergency preparedness is people are like, I can't afford to do it, which I totally understand. Like, I have had to do that on a budget forever too, and like piecemeal buy things. Like, I'm not going to buy $10,000 worth of product in one thing, you know,
right?
And just say, I'm going to put this much aside 1 month. There's one company, I think you know them, Ammo Squared, where they allow you to, yes, I love them. They're great. They allow you to kind of, you could set $10 aside a week and then build up your ammo stockpile. So there's ways you can do things on a budget.
Yes.
And not only that, but we have so much free access to information that you can learn how to do a lot of these skills. It doesn't cost any money to figure out what your meetup points are, what your link up procedure is with your family, to learn how to use that radio, to learn how to do some kind of land navigation. All that stuff is free. And so, yes, obviously, if you can go take a course, that's amazing. Go take a course. But if you can't, and you don't have any money for emergency preparedness, there's a lot that you can do just by watching some YouTube videos.
Absolutely. I really love that. And that's not, yeah, I feel like if you're listening to this episode and you haven't started your journey, I think it can feel overwhelming, but hopefully this is like a jump off place for you. And like a, you know, maybe you just go home tonight and you like talk to your significant other, or you like,
yes, for
next
sure.
time you're on the phone with your mom and you're talking about your crazy aunt and what she did recently to like piss off your mom or something, you know, just like take a moment. It's very specific, I know. Take a moment and like ask her, you know, what your family plan is, and maybe recommend this episode, maybe recommend Belle's page. I really love that. I want to be sure, if you're okay with it, to hit on kind of like food and water. I mentioned that I have like dry food that I think is technically, I don't know if this is the right word, but like water activated. And I have like some water stores, and I have propane heat. Like I have some ways to make food. Then again, if I'm in my car and something hits and I have to go like find shelter, or like, you know, drive out in BLM land, I don't know, something like that. That's going to be a little bit different. So for people that don't maybe know where to start with water and food, what would you recommend?
Yeah, I would recommend having some level of water and food storage, obviously, if you can. We have a lot of those like 25-year buckets. Again, it depends exactly what your plan is. Like we have the big 25-year lasting buckets and we have water stored here, but if you go on the move, you're not going to be able to carry all that. So we have a lot of little like MREs that are just thrown in bug out bags. We have stuff that we keep in our trailer as well. So I think it's good to have a variety and be realistic in terms of like what you're actually going to be able to use and take with you. And then in terms of water, like I try to do some of storing water as well as some of having a water filter. Just because you don't know. Like if I did have to go on the move, I can only carry so much water with me, and then I'm probably going to want to use my water filter in like in a river or whatever the case is. So yeah, I think when it comes to water and food storage, just kind of hit your basics and be cognizant of what is realistic if you have to go on the move. So have some things that are, these are my stockpile for home. This is kind of what I have for on the move. I keep an emergency bag in like my car as well. That's more for just like if I get a flat on the side of the road and I'm stuck on the road overnight, but have some emergency food and water in there too, because you never know when an emergency is going to happen. I mean, there's a good chance you're not going to be home when an emergency happens. You might be at work. So just having that stuff spread out. And I don't have one particular like food or water straw brand in particular that I like recommend. Get whatever you can afford, whatever your personal preference is. I've like taste tested some of them to be like, oh, these ones taste better than others. But in the event of an emergency, it's like you're just gonna eat whatever you have. So
Right. Absolutely. And as far as like practicing, because, it's one of those like we all know practice as you preach and stuff. And we talked about practicing land nav. We talked about practicing communication with your, whoever you want to stay in contact with, or maybe like local resources. Do you also recommend testing out those purification tools as well as like, maybe take one of those MREs and like actually try to heat it up and like taste it? Of course, it wouldn't matter short when you're surviving, but
yeah, no, I think that's a great idea. Honestly, I think the more things you can test and play with, the better. Like, we taste tested the emergency food, kind of just to do it for a video to give reviews to people who were actually curious so they could be like, okay, yeah, I would prefer to buy this one because I know it tastes better. But I think it's good to do it like you said, just for knowing the ins and outs of it, because especially in an emergency, there's so many things that could happen and you're like, I don't actually know how to use this thing and I'm panicking and I don't actually know how this works. And so, yeah, I think it's good to test all of your gear, test everything out. Really, camping is a good kind of way to test that out and actually eat those. You know what I mean?
Yes, my guy and I went camping. It was one of our first dates, and I brought the propane tank that I've had in my closet forever. And I sat it on the table, and he was like, "Great, like, do you want to show me how to use it?" And I was like, "Well, as you can see, I packed the instruction guide." And he was like, "Oh, gotcha." And we thought it was missing a part, which I was like, it very well might be. Like I've been moving this thing around. I've had it forever. And then at one point, like we thought the propane tank was gonna like blow up. Like I had a fire extinguisher in my car. Thank God. And I like put it near us when we were working on it. It took us like an hour to get this thing lit. So I hope that is a testament to like do test your gear. And like honestly, it's been so long since we've camped. I probably need to go like retest it and get used to it again. But yeah, I love that. And go ahead.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great example because we've had so many things just from going out and whether it's like camping, doing land nav, whatever it is, where we've run into things and you're like, oh, I didn't know that could happen or I didn't know that's how that worked. And so really there's no way to know unless you're going out and actively testing your gear.
Yes. And there's no shame here. Like, this is an opportunity to like, try out your stuff. And from what I understand, there's a difference between purification and filtration with water. Like filtration being like removing sediment, and then purification meaning removing like other biologicals like bacteria. Do you kind of prepare for both levels?
Yeah, I try. We have so many water filters. I don't even know. Like we have so many water filters, but yeah, there is like different levels of it. And I think that's another important part of being aware of your like where you live in your environment, because like we had one interesting test where we had actually taken a water filter out to a stream by us, and it was a water filter that worked totally great. We had tested it other places before. We took it out to a stream by us and we stuck like one of those little testing strips in
Mm-hmm.
after we purified the water, and then the water that was not purified, and it was like almost no different, and we had no idea that this like stream behind us was like super clean. Like you could just drink straight out of that stream pretty much.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah,
Okay.
because we had tested that water filter in other places and it had come out differently, like it had taken stuff out. And so it was a good thing to know that like the stream in our backyard is fairly clean. Am I still going to purify it? Obviously, because I'm like just want to double check.
Right,
but
right.
it's good to actually know what is in your immediate local area.
Fantastic. That is so good to know. That's so good to know. And yeah, I saw a reel on us. It might have been your reel back in the day, but on sillcock keys, like that was a totally new concept to me. That's what they're called, right? Sillcock?
Yeah. I have one of those, but yeah, I haven't made a video on it, so it must have been someone else. But those are super cool.
Got you. Yeah. How practical would you say those are? Like they're probably a couple dollars. I don't even remember. I think I spent $5
Yeah, they're pretty
on
cheap.
it. Yeah, at Home Depot. And I think I got one for like the bug out bag I made for my mom and myself, and I watched like a tutorial on how to utilize it. But I think it's just the key to access water storage from facilities around.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. From like your local facilities, yeah.
Yeah,
no, I think it's a super beneficial thing to have. I think it's good to have any of that stuff because you don't know what you're going to have and not have in the event of an emergency, and especially something like that. It's so small that it's like might as well just throw it in your bag, and if you do have the opportunity to use it, you have the opportunity to use it. If not, it's not like it's weighing you down, you know.
Right.
So I think that's it's a good thing, especially if you live in an area like we have so many resources around us that could be used on.
Fantastic. Okay, that's good to know. And if you all don't know what that is, just kind of look it up. It's a little tiny metal device that it's literally like a key to access water from devices that otherwise you could not access water from.
Yeah, exactly. It's like looks like a little X. It's just like
yes,
a metal X. Yeah.
exactly, like the size of your two fingers crossed over, and then it's metal. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I thought that was an interesting tool. I was like, I must go get one, so I like ran over to Home Depot. Fairly small expense. Okay, the thing that I'm obviously going to be excited to talk about. All this is incredibly important, but firearms and like self-protection. I want to preface with like when I got into this and I got into guns, it was actually during COVID time. This was when like fear was very much the theme. Like it was one of the big reasons I wanted to continue to train other than just personal safety. But I remember I bought a rifle because I was like, I'm obviously going to need a rifle. I bought a plate carrier. I bought a bug out belt. I bought all the things that like I needed to feel better, even though I didn't know how to utilize them all. And then I had a buddy I was talking to, and he was like, what are you going to do when like the stores are still open and like the police are still active, and like maybe it's like there's like 72-hour window before things really go into mayhem. Like, are you going to walk into a Walmart with a plate carrier and a rifle? And I was like, well, no, you know, it was one of those moments where I was like, obviously not. And so I actually have a bit of a scaled kind of firearm setup depending on how far we are into potential unrest. That starts with like, it's like my P365 fuse, those like, you know, extendo 21 round mags, a few internal mag carriers, and then like a larger shirt to drape over that. That doesn't make me look like someone militant or someone to be robbed or like, you know, in that situation where people are looting or they're stealing kind of things. For people wondering about, today's been cool. We've been talking about everything in like this almost like a spectrum. Do you all have some sort of setup for that? Like something that's maybe more covert all the way to like full on, you know, plate carrier style?
Yeah, for sure. No, I'm so glad you brought that up because I think that's a big thing that people don't talk about either is like, I think a lot of people refer to it as like the gray man concept, and we're working on a course for that specifically because what your setup might look like, it might be different than my setup because I don't know where you live. But like you said, if you live in the city and you're going to be going into Walmart, you don't want to be walking around with your plate carrier looking super militant on day one because you're just going to be a target essentially. And so I think that's an important thing is to like know your environment, and you don't want to look like a threat most of the time. And
right.
So having a plate carrier that you can maybe wear under your shirt, I don't know, I've personally had problems as like a girl, like even the ones that you wear under your shirt, I can't find one unless I wear like a baggy jacket. I can't find one that you like can't obviously see.
Right.
But my boyfriend can. He could wear them, and you're like, I have no idea that he's wearing them. And
Right.
they're lower level plates, obviously, because they're like soft armor. But I
Yes.
think it's important to try to, conceal when you can, especially at the beginning, because if you're just walking down the street with your rifle and your plate carrier on, you're just becoming a target.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Do you have like a personal carry situation, like everyday carry loadout that you have ready for that type of, say, like bug out, or maybe just like to carry on your person around your property or whatever, compared to your everyday carry like concealment setup? Does that change for you?
Yeah, for sure. 100%. And another thing that's big, and I think you kind of mentioned this before the podcast, was like you were mentioning pepper spray. And like, I am a huge advocate for pepper ball guns because I will carry a gun to like, I usually have a Glock 19 that I'll carry, but I'm also a big advocate for carrying, like, we have the Berna pepper ball gun. We also, I think the other one's Tipman. It's like a big pepper ball rifle that we have that's more for like riot control. And I'm a huge advocate for having both because depending on the scenario, like I don't always want to necessarily kill someone. You know
Right.
what I mean? And a lot of people also, if you're just not experienced with firearms or you don't feel comfortable shooting them, then maybe you shouldn't have a firearm. Maybe you can have a pepper ball gun or have some other way to deter someone. And so, or like, for example, if someone's stealing my TV and going to run out of my house, I might want to stop them with a pepper ball, but to me, that's not worth killing someone over.
Right.
So I think having that different levels of things that you use depending on what the situation is really important, and it's going to be a little bit different for everyone depending on your level of training, what you're comfortable with. And like I said, what like my boyfriend can actually, he can get away with wearing plates. I can't get away with wearing plates because you're going to see them under my shirt. So it's
Right.
kind of going to vary for everybody and their skill set.
Absolutely. I actually am unfamiliar with the pepper ball gun. Is it
Oh,
just
you
like
should
a
test it out.
Yeah,
It's
absolutely.
awesome.
So you've like tested.
Yes.
So is it spray, or is it like, are they hard projectiles that aren't penetrative?
They're hard projectiles. So essentially you can get pepper balls to put in there, or you can also get they have like kinetic rounds that you can shoot out of it, and then also some people have put like steel balls in there. I don't know that that's necessarily legal to do everywhere, so I'm
Gotcha.
not
Okay.
sure, but yeah, I
Yes.
know that people do that. But it's super cool because they essentially are similar to like a paintball gun because they're CO2 activated, but the
Right.
difference is that I mean, there's some paintball guns that can do this, but like a big problem with the paintball guns was like if it would activate the CO2 and it would just be leaking out. So by the time you're going to go to shoot your gun, all the CO2 is already gone. Where with
Right.
these, like with the Berna, for example, the reason I really like the Berna is because you activate the CO2 with the trigger. So you can just leave the CO2 in there, you pull the trigger once that activates it, and then the second time you pull the trigger, you're shooting the pepper ball at the person. And
Right.
so I'm a huge fan of those. I'm a big advocate for them. And they're small enough that you can, I think they even have a smaller one now, like the one I have is a little bit bigger, but you can just put them in your purse, you can conceal carry them. It's super easy. And it's going to deter most people. Like some people will come back and be like, I'm just going to shoot someone if they come in my house, and so everyone has their own personal opinions and what their personal standards are, but
Yes, of
I highly
course.
encourage to try them out because they do work pretty good.
That's fantastic. Yeah, I love pepper spray. I don't love right getting pepper sprayed, like let's be for real, but I do love non-lethals. There's a I don't know if you know Chuck Haggard Agile Training. His saying is it's the kind of tool between a harsh word and a gunshot, right? And I think that's a very practical way of looking at things. I think people who kind of say, oh, I would just shoot them, haven't really done, first of all, done any scenario training, like any type of training that has pushed you to having to make the decision to pull a firearm. Like, I think these are people who go out to a range and they set up a target about, 10 yards away, 7 to 10 yards away. They draw from their holster, they go out to full presentation, they fire off 2 shots and they reholster and they go home. And I think they don't think about, the bigger picture. I try to tell people too, I learned this in a course called ECQC, Extreme Close Quarter Concepts with ShivWorks. There are times where you might tell someone to get back. You might have a harsh word. You might say, get back or get the fuck back, however you want to kind of exclaim to have someone honor your space. They may not honor your ask. And it might be because, they just came from a dangerous situation and they're looking for help. They're looking for their child they lost and they're extremely panicked. They're maybe someone who has special needs and they don't have like normal, they're not neurotypical and can't respect your ask, all the way to someone who's deaf and hard of hearing and literally did not hear you. And so there are so many situations where non-lethals come into play to get someone to respect your ask. Because worst case scenario, you spray someone in the face with pepper spray and it sucks, right? Rather than you punched a hole in someone. There's a very big difference. And so I think this conversation of non-lethals is extremely important. And yes, sure, it is something that is extremely subjective, but at least we can be here to like offer some solutions and some expansion of idea of like, the gun is not the first,
Yeah, especially because like bullets travel and a lot of people don't. At least I feel like some people don't think about that. If you're in your house, you have an intruder, and I go to shoot them, and you miss, and it goes through the wall, and it hits your kid that's in the other room. I mean, that's completely possible. So those are just things to think about is, to mitigate those risks.
Absolutely. There's also, I posted a reel the other day of like, hey, come with me to my range training. Like, for those of you that don't know how to structure your range training, come with me. And I reviewed my footage, and like right after I shot and was like, oh, I floated my gun, and made a post. Everyone was like, what the hell is floating your gun? And in retention shooting, when you're shooting really close to your body, if you come out, like say you're in a fight, you're pushing someone off of you and you float your gun, if that firearm is offline to the person you're aiming for, you could totally hit someone behind you. There's a really famous case out of Brazil. A guy goes to shoot another motorcyclist behind him. He floats his gun. He shoots his pregnant wife through the stomach behind him because he floats his gun. Like, when you have that disconnect from your proprioceptive indexes or indices, and you decide to float your firearm in a place where you actually have no idea where you're aiming, there's so many situations where like, if someone had another option, right, to deploy, or waited until they had enough distance to deploy their firearm, but the only thing they had was their gun. I mean, it really begs the question of like, how can we change that narrative? And so I really appreciate this conversation.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you talked about it, because a lot of people, especially being in the gun community, whenever I talk about like using non-lethals, using pepper balls, they're like, no, everything gun. And like, I'm like, I'm pro gun, we have guns in the house, but I'm also very pro like using a pepper ball too, because you don't know what people's skill set is either. And like, from going to the range, I'm sure you do lots of stuff where you're running and you're getting your adrenaline going and all kinds of stuff. When your adrenaline's pumping, and if you're not going to the range all the time, which I would say is like most people who own a gun, they're not going to the range practicing all the time, they're definitely not running and shooting, you're definitely probably gonna miss. Like, honestly, you're probably gonna miss unless they're real close to you. Right.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, thank you for giving your 2 cents on this. And it makes me feel really good about, just further confirms recommending your profile. And yeah, dude, I'm sure you get that. You have 500,000 on Instagram. Like, you're reaching like so many people that are coming from that very like typical bought a gun, goes to the range once a year, thinks they know everything because they have a gun, it's in their name. Just some crazy suggestions out there. I get them all the time. I recently hired my sister because I was just like, I can't do it, and she was like, I will answer these comments for you. So yeah,
I can't deal with the some of the times with the questions, or not necessarily questions, because they're not even really questions, they're just people making comments or trying to like ask a question to like try to incite something. And they have this like preset thing in their head, like you were saying with the shooting, you get a lot of people like that. Plus, like with emergency preparedness, you get a lot of people that are like thinking I'm like this tinfoil hat person, like just stocking food and like in my house and like crazy stuff. And I'm like, literally most emergencies I'm prepared for, like I go out hiking all the time. That's like a big thing where I could run into some horrible situation, have to be prepared for. Like, I'm just preparing for your typical emergencies. If the zombie apocalypse happens, I guess I'm ready for that too, but I'm not like wearing my tinfoil hat, like hiding in the closet,
Yes, exactly. And also, like, if you go to the range and you don't have a tourniquet on your person, don't talk to me. You know what I mean? Like, there are some levels that really need to be met. And that's not.
Oh, for sure. Yes. Just like we talked about having a plan for like if somebody has to go to the hospital and having a route in place. I mean, there's so many times that I've been to the range and seen people like miss all of the basic information. Even this like don't point your gun at anything that you don't intend to shoot. I mean, that's a huge one. I saw a horrible video like about a week or two ago, and this isn't to hate on the police department because I'm sure there's a lot of great police out there, but there were these two police officers who were goofing around and they pointed their guns at each other.
Yes, oh my God, I saw that one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And shot the other guy, and it's like, okay, this is like basic rules here. Like, do not point your gun on anything you don't intend to shoot.
Dude, and he's so lucky he wasn't pointing at his head.
Oh my gosh, I know.
He's so lucky. Like, I saw that. I had to, okay, it's one of those videos, like, you're like, oh, I wish I had never seen this. But since you saw it, you have to watch it 5 times to be like, what the hell just happened?
I had to keep watching it because I was like, how did this whole situation unfold?
Yeah, you're like, why is he being, oh my God. And then, like, you almost don't want to look away, so you don't read the caption yet. You're like, what the hell? So yeah, gosh, man. I'll have to make a highlight of this just to like be like, don't forget the fundamentals. When, dude, BLM land, just Jesus. So like, do you know what BLM? I'm assuming you know what BLM land is.
We ran into that when we were in Utah because we were doing the reconnaissance and hostage rescue course out there. We were like, let's try to not do it during hunting season because we're gonna have people land navving out there, and so we don't want a bunch of people hunting at the same time.
Oh gosh, that's such a good point. I didn't even think about that. Oh my God. Okay, thank you. Good note. I'm over here like going on to BLM land. One of the things I do not do is shoot next to someone. But two points. The other day, my guy and I were. He's really new to firearms. I may have like been his first person to show him how to shoot. Which now he's done freaking ECQC. He's wanting to do competitive shooting and tactical games with me next year. Like, we're really getting into it. But we're out at the top of this canyon, and I went through the entire emergency plan. We talked about the nearest hospitals. We talked about as far as like tourniquet usage, chest sealing, wound packing. We literally spent like 20 minutes. I showed him everything I know because I have a lot more training on him with Stop the Bleed than him with Stop the Bleed. And I had a thought, and I was like, it's crazy to think that some people don't do this. We're shooting like 2 hours in. This guy drives up in his Jeep with his son, and you can tell their money. Like, they got a lot of money. They got some Gucci guns. They're in their flip flops. They're wearing like crisp white shirts. Like, they're up there to like shoot these guns that they probably just bought. He drives over to me. I've got my like giant competition shotgun, my shotgun belt. I've got a gun OWB. I've got like a rifle like sitting in the back. I'm all geeked out. Comes up. I was like, hi, sir, how's it going? Like, I always hit him with that really friendly, like, girly, like, how's it going? Like, what are you out here to do? And he was like, well, we're here to just like have some fun and shoot. And I was like, fantastic. And I was like, how would you all feel about us using this backstop? We're literally going to be done in 10 minutes here. I had one more drill to run for training. And he was like, well, we'll just shoot perpendicular to you. So to explain, I'm at this berm here shooting into the berm. He wants to go on the same berm because it's kind of like a roundabout berm, and then like behind that is another berm. It's hard to explain. He wants to go to the side of me and shoot into the berm that way. And at first I didn't understand him, and so he was like, I'm just gonna go check out some options. So he drives around, and I see that they're putting up targets perpendicular to me. And my guy and I kind of looked at each other like, oh, hell no. So like I walk over because women are way less like, men are like more likely to be like, right. Whereas like if I walked up and I'm like, hi, so actually no.
Yeah.
I went up and I was like, hey, so I'm actually very uncomfortable with this. The reason is if you even so just slightly cant your muzzle and fire off around, guess who's to the left of you?
Yeah.
So I'm actually not going to be okay with this. And we were here first. So like, listen, here's what we'll do. We're going to take 20 minutes. We'll pack up. He kind of like blows me off. He's like, you know what? We'll just go over there, like to the other further back berm. We're both shooting into the same direction, but we're offset enough. Quite frankly, I was hoping that we'd be done shooting by the time they even like get their car over there. So
right, get set up.
Dude, oh my gosh. But like hit the what? Like if they had been pointed in and at any point canted their wrist, there's just motion and cooked off around, it goes into my boyfriend or myself. And I was mortified. I was actually like, I wasn't shaking, but I was like, if he just outright refuses, I'm just going to be like, hey, no worries. We're going to pack up. Just give us like 5 minutes to clear out. We've got a few steel in the ground. We're just going to grab those. We're going to go. Like, you guys, I was like, I'm not fighting with the dude who's holding a fucking AK in his hand. And like, I hope that goes to just explain to the listener, like, careful with that. Careful with BLM land. Like, not everyone has like the same standard, and like setting a just like we talked about setting a standard with like preparedness, like setting one for even like range visits. Like, gosh, sorry, I went on a little rant there.
No,
I
appreciate
that was like
it.
very recent.
No, I appreciate it, because that's a huge thing when I go to the range, and I think everybody experiences that at the range, and I'm always surprised by some of the stuff that people do, and I'm like, that is not safe. And the craziest part is that the people always that are being like unsafe are oftentimes people that have like the least amount of training, and you're like,
yes,
you should definitely be like cognizant of what you're doing. So I think that's a great point, and like people should have a plan in place when you go to the range of like, these are the things that I need to do, these are the basic fundamentals of shooting, and if something does happen, this is what I'm going to do in the event of that.
I love that. Absolutely. And I think this is a beautiful just like loop around to preparedness starts even at your most like basic level. Like, I was popping over to a canyon to go shoot. Like, it's probably a 4-hour time commitment, and I'm doing what I love, competition shooting, you know, showing, you know, some things to my guy, doing some time drills, but it still led to me having to have a medical kit, some food so we don't get, you know, low blood sugar around handling firearms, water to make sure we're not dehydrated in the Utah sun. Like, we were very much prepared, as much as we could be, and that wasn't even like a natural disaster. So anyway, I love that. I love that so much. I feel like we have almost covered like everything you can cover, and like almost, it's not even foundational. This goes beyond that. You've mentioned so much in your area of expertise, and I really appreciate you taking the time to come on today. I know that you probably could have made like, I don't know, 20 reels in this time. So I really appreciate, of course, filmed. Editing takes way longer, but you know.
The editing takes so long. No, I'm happy to be here.
Fantastic. I'm so glad. As far as like where people can, you know, you mentioned this earlier in the episode, I've been trying to get better at getting guest speakers to really share their resources earlier on so that people can start checking them out. But, you know, say people listen to this episode all the way through. First of all, thank you guys. That's awesome. Definitely take a moment to rate the podcast. I always forget to say that, and then I like never see ratings. I'm like, damn. But
I'll rate it.
Oh my God, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you. For those listening that are like, okay, I'm bought in, I want to train with you. You said you're going to start offering some of these online products. Like, where can they stay tuned for these to release?
Yeah, so just stay tuned to my page, which is Tactical Belle. I also made our business Instagram, which is Frontline Preparedness. It's in my Tactical Belle bio, so you'll see it there. I don't post too much on there yet because we haven't posted the courses yet, but we will be having online courses coming out there soon, I would say within the next month. And then we also will be releasing our playbook, which I think is super important for families so that they can actually just go through that guide and fill in the blanks and build that plan, because really a lot of it is all in the planning prior to the actual crisis.
Absolutely. That was beautiful. And before I ever end episodes, I like to ask the guest speaker what they would like to leave the listeners with. It can be an anecdote, a quote, piece of encouragement, anything you'd like to just leave them with.
Oh, that's a hard question.
Well, you just said it beautifully. You were just like, it starts with preparedness. And then I was like, hit us with another thing.
Yeah. I would say that it's all in the planning, and the kind of motto that we use over at our company, Frontline Preparedness, is expect the unexpected.
I love that. That's beautiful. Yeah, thank you so much. This has been incredible for me. I feel I've always explained that this podcast is like the most selfish and selfless endeavor, because I get to ask questions I want to ask and I'm curious about, but then I get to provide it to people at no cost. And of course, we have one, you know, small sponsor, but it's been really lovely talking to you. I think I saw that you followed me, and I was like, what the hell? Like, she's following me. And I was like, I was really excited. I was like, this is like a topic, you know, your niche is something I've wanted to expand more. So appreciate you taking the time more than you know. I can't wait to tell my mom about this episode. She's going to love, we just recently the other day had like a 2-hour FaceTime call on like which ham radio we should buy. And like, is there a course we can learn ham radio on? And like,
oh my gosh. Okay. I'll give you the full breakdown if you message me. Cause like I said, I tried to kind of go into it a little bit, but it's so much information that, I mean, it would take like hours. So like, if you just DM me, be like, this is what we're looking to do, I will message you and be like, okay, yeah, this, and this, and do that. And so, yeah, just let me know, and we'll totally set something up.
Okay, beautiful. That sounds amazing. Awesome. Well,
Yeah.
thank you so much. And guys, in the meantime, like I said, please rate that podcast. Stay safe, stay vigilant, and we'll see you in the next one. Awesome.
Thank
Great.
you.
Well, thank you.